Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business since 1994. That is 30 years of fun. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the real deal, to give you the truth, and most importantly, why things work or don't work. Today's topic, we're going to talk about, the old terrible peaks that we hit and the drudgery of maintenance. I'm hopefully going to change your mind in how you view it, though. Before I get to that, let me thank Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They currently have over 280 five-star reviews on Zillow. They've got a phenomenal team out there. Jonathan and Lynn, I personally vouch for them and the rest of their team. Give them a shout at 386-451-2412. The old peak, the old plateau. Am I just working on maintenance at this point? These are concerns I get quite often from trainees, from clients, from people that I know on social media that ask me questions, and I totally understand their concerns. I mean, I've gone through them myself. We hit plateaus. We're going along on a certain strength schedule, and all of a sudden we hit a point where we're just not able to move that weight up anymore. Or we reach a peak in our 5K times, our endurance times, our triathlons, whatever it might be. We hit a certain point and it's like, man, I'm just not really getting any faster. Or, of course, it happens in weight loss. People that are trying to lose weight, the weight just pours off of them early on, which this is all just simply science. I mean, that's what happens when we see our best results early on in any of these endeavors I just mentioned. But they reach a point and they just say, man, I'm not dropping any more weight. All right. So I get the concerns, but again, I want to try to maybe change your mind on how you view them a little bit. So let's completely dive into that. Let me start by giving you some numbers first. So we tend to hit a plateau at anything fitness-wise, and weight loss maybe a little bit sooner, but we tend to hit a plateau within 6 months of consistent training. So if we're going to the gym and we're on a 3-time-a-week strength schedule and we're hitting it every 3 days and we're pushing ourselves, we're following progressive overload like we all should. That's one of the mainstays that I tell people is undeniably true, is progressive overload. If we're not trying to make ourselves a little better each time we go, then we are not getting better, plain and simple. So if we're doing that, we're doing it 3 days a week consistently, we're going to hit a plateau, our first plateau, probably within 6 months. Research shows 4 to 6 months. So it kind of depends on your body type and your motivation and all that good stuff. But 4 to 6 months, we're going to hit a plateau for sure. All right. Other numbers. Our VO2 max tends to peak a little bit higher than strength. Some studies state in your upper 30s, some studies state in your 40s, but it definitely peaks within that time frame. Now, your VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can produce in a minute. So that is the gold standard to assess your cardiorespiratory fitness. So you will see like older athletes that are still elite in their mid 40s or so in the endurance world, but you're not going to really see that so much in the strength world because our strength really peaks in our 20s. So once we hit 30 with strength, we don't get a lot stronger. Again, peak-wise, somebody might say, well, I wasn't at my peak strength until I was 49. It's like, okay, you started working out when you were 47. So we're not talking about that, comparing apples to apples. If you worked out all the way through, you were your strongest point in your 20s. That's when we have the most testosterone. That's when we have the most ability to grow muscle. Again, VO2 max a little bit later, 30s, maybe early 40s, but that's when we peak. So we are inevitably going to hit those peaks. All right. That's when, if you look at all sports, that's when the athletes are at their absolute best. All right. Now, again, just to play devil's advocate, you might say, well, when I go to these local 5Ks, older runners tend to win very often or have among the best times. It's like, hey, look, I get that because I'm an older runner, and sometimes I'm like, man, all the faster people are in this age group, man. I don't get a plaque or whatever. We have to consider that's motivation. A lot of younger folks are not going to your local 5Ks, okay? They're in college, they're partying, they're not doing that. Or if they're in college and running, they're on the cross country team. So it's not a product of fitness as much. It's a product of in these local events. I'm just playing devil's advocate because some of you will say, well, how do you peak in your 30s and 40s when oftentimes outside of the overall winners, some of the better times are from older athletes. And again, and that's a beautiful thing. That's a wonderful thing. And that's kind of where I'm going to pick this up here in a minute. But it's because they show up, plain and simple. And that's a good thing. They're motivated to show up. Motivation is huge. So we peak in those times. Now, a little bit more numbers, then we're going to dive into this. So we actually begin to atrophy a little bit in our VO2 max, not a little bit actually, a lot in our VO2 max after 21 days of inactivity. 21 days of inactivity. 21 days. That's not a lot. So I recently had a hernia surgery. And, I couldn't run, I couldn't bike, I couldn't do anything vigorous except for walk, which isn't vigorous. So I had to accept the fact that my VO2 max was going to atrophy some. So it was going to slide backwards. It was going to decline. It begins to happen in 21 days. Get this, your muscular strength and your hypertrophy begin to atrophy after 96 hours. That's 4 days. That doesn't mean you go from rock hard 185 pound rip specimen up on stage to 120 pound weakling in a matter of 4 days. No. But what it does state is the process begins. You begin to atrophy. Now that's important for a couple reasons. Number one, well, don't take time off. Number two, people that get on these workout programs that are only working one muscle group per day, well, if that's the case, then it's 7 days before they hit the next muscle group, which means that they're going to atrophy before they get back to that point. So they're really never moving forward in that program. But that's for another podcast. But it is important to know that that's how quickly our body starts to slide backwards if we take time off. The beauty of this is it is so easy to maintain. All right. So one more little number here. In our VO2 max, we tend to decline about 10% per decade after the age of 30. That's quite a bit. Now, naturally, the more we train or the more consistent we train, the less we're going to decline, but we are going to decline. So, by the time you reach 70 and you're still running, you have seen quite a decline in your VO2 max, but you've seen a lot less decline if you keep running, because remember, after 21 days, we start to go back almost to baseline. So if we keep with it, the decline is going to be marginal compared to what potentially can happen through simple nature. So are these numbers making you depressed? Because I don't want them to. It's really quite the opposite. I mean, I always believe, personally, my belief system is, if you can control every variable that you can control, if you can control everything that's out in front of you, you're going to be just fine. So I want you to look at the peaks and maintenance differently. All right. So let's say that you are 21 years old and you just nailed 19 push-ups to volitional fatigue or failure in your American College of Sports Medicine Champus fitness test, all right, that we used to do, still do, I guess, sometimes. So you do that, and you're proud of yourself, and the practitioner looks at his little chart and he says, "Oh, well, that's fair for your age." Oh, okay. But you're a determined individual. You're tough. You're like, I just want to be better. So you stay with it. You stay with it and you stay with it. And every time you work your upper body, you continue to do your push-ups every time. 3 days a week, whatever it might be. Now you reach the grand old age of 61. All right. And I'm using these numbers on purpose because I went to my chart to find different numbers, right? I wanted to go to each decade. So I went 21 to 61. So you get up to 61. You do it again. You see that old guy and he's 114. And you do your test and you still nail 19 push-ups. Well, now he's looking at you going, he already looked at you like, oh, Darian, you're pretty good. You're 61. You're coming in here. You look like a military drill sergeant, because you just, let's see what you got. And the same dude nails 19 push-ups. Well, now he pulls out his trusty little sheet and he goes, you are in the excellent category. You're within 10% of everybody in your decade of your 60s. Wow. All you did was maintain. That's all you did was maintain. But you know what? We need to look at maintenance differently. Because if you maintained that all along, did you really maintain? Because you went from somebody in your age group of 21 where all these other, college juniors or whatever are like bigger than you and stronger than you, and you kind of felt bad, but they got cocky and they worked out until they were about 24. Then they left college and then they headed out to their jobs and they got fat like most people do. Sorry, people, it's just what happens. And it does tend to happen more when people have success early on, by the way. I hate to break it to you. Sometimes a little chip on your shoulder in your early ages helps you when you become older. Again, that's a whole nother podcast, and that's me using my psych degree, but it's true. So anyway, they go out and do that. They go out, they get sloppy. They didn't work out anymore, Then they come back and they do a test at 60 and they can't even do a push-up. Matter of fact, they had trouble getting off the floor. But you, because you stuck with it and didn't like the fact that you weren't as strong as those other burly dudes at the frat parties, are now looking at them like, punk. And what did you do? All you did was maintain. All. Get it? All. Maybe it's not all afterwards. Maybe maintenance is a hell of a lot harder than we think and something we should value a hell of a lot more, right? All right, so now let's look at VO2 max, the other category, cardiorespiratory fitness. So you're 21 years of age and you go to the same guy, the same instructor, and he tests you on the exercise bike and you got this face mask on and you're blowing into this thing and you're doing all this hard breathing and you pop off there and he tells you, hey man, you got a VO2 max of 35 milliliters per kilogram minute. You went, what? Well, this means that your cardiorespiratory is in the poor fare category for your age. You look at him and you go, great. So my push-ups essentially suck for my age and my VO2 max sucks for my age. So am I going to have a heart attack before I'm 25? And the clinician looks and says, no, this doesn't have anything to do with health. This is performance. And you're just, don't enter any 5Ks anytime soon, that just go handle yourself. Nah, they wouldn't be so like that. Just trying to give some levity to this. Cause I do think it's a very important and an extremely cool subject area that we really need to look at. But you're the same dude. You did your push-ups 3 times a week every time you went to the gym. You've barely missed any days of training in the last 40 years. And sure enough, you started jogging, you started running, you stayed with it, you worked hard and you come back and you still see that, super old instructor now. He's, oh, I remember you. Puts you on the bike, goes through the same rigmarole, boom, you come off, you blow a 35, all right? You still do it because you're like, wow, I maintained it all these years. Wow, that's cool. He pulls out the list and he goes, oh my goodness. Dude, you're in the excellent to superior category for your age group. You're in the top 5-10% of everybody in their 60s in the world. You're like, wow, all I did was maintain. So do you get it? Maintenance isn't easy. I can tell you this. Years of training is great, but you know what? Nothing really gets in the way of your exercise if you're a committed athlete than injuries. I mean, a lot of times people will come to me in their 40s and 50s and say, hey, I want to continue to get faster at triathlon and running. And I'll say, don't get hurt. Because every time a person has an overuse injury, they have to take time off. Remember the 21 days of atrophy? So, every time we get hurt and take significant time off, whether it be strength training or cardiorespiratory exercise, our peak is slightly going backwards. It just is, depending on the time. If it's a few days, of course, no big deal. If it's a month, it is sliding backwards. And every time it's going to be a lot harder to get back up to where you were. It just is. I've experienced this myself. I've experienced with athletes, and the literature pointed out. So the advice I give them is don't get hurt. Get on a reasonable program of running, cycling, swimming, because triathletes are notorious for overuse injuries because they live by the more is better mantra. And it is until it's not. And what I see oftentimes is a lot of people that I did triathlons with and all that years ago aren't even doing them anymore. Maybe they burned out, and a lot of them just can't. Their bodies aren't physically able. Does that mean that it's a bad sport and running's a bad sport? Heck no, I'm doing a 5K Saturday. I think it's great to do these things, but we do have to remember moderation because we don't want to set ourselves back physically or with our health. So if we look at it like I'm training for the long haul, like I want to still be doing these things when I'm 80, when I'm 90, which I see people out there still doing, then maybe we're not doing a marathon every 6 months. Maybe we are focusing more on shorter distances. Because research is very clear. It's not the intensity that beats you up. It's the duration. It's absolutely the duration. Now, if you go long and hard, well, that's just ridiculous, and that's a recipe for disaster. But it's really not the intensity. 5K runners can probably run until they literally get ready to check off this earth. Marathoners, it's different. Now, again, everybody's a little different, but for the most part, it is not the duration that beats you up. It's the duration that beats you up. It is not the intensity. So for the endurance athletes, I say, don't get hurt. Like, you're racing for the long haul. Okay, so maybe you're not placing in your age group now. And I'm using just all of this as examples. But in 30 years, now you are. Why? Because your 5K times didn't go backwards. They did a little. There's always going to be a little decline. But they didn't decline like the guy who, was kicking butt in his 20s and then went to corporate America and got fat and got out of shape and got on blood pressure medication and did all that stuff, which is basically the American way right now. And then he went and he saw a good doctor, like a couple of them that I have work out with me here, and they slapped him across the face and they said, hey, man, you're killing yourself, right? And they help them, guide them off of medication, potentially one day if they can, by good diet, good exercise. And now this person is fit, and then they jump back in the 5K world, and now they're not nearly as fast as they were in their 20s, and they're getting beat by that guy who wasn't fast in his 20s, but he kept it up the whole time. Now, don't take that as a negative. I want people to at least go that route of getting better, of course, one day, and getting back to physical activity. But it's even better. It's even better to have never stopped to begin with, right? So best case scenario is that. Second best is you get back to it. Third is you never do, right? So maintenance isn't really that bad when we look at it that way. Now, is it? In the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, that's a model that we use in psychology to help people overcome bad habits. It was originally used for smoking cessation, getting people to quit nicotine. And it works pretty good. And there's these different stages that I won't bore you with all of them. But stage 5 is maintenance. Like, that's the nirvana. That's the peak. That's where we want people to get to. Because when they get the maintenance, what it means is they're maintaining a healthy behavior now, right? And the only thing that gets them out of that healthy behavior, according to statistics, is a major life change. Divorce, death of a spouse, moving, something like that. Because if they can maintain this healthy behavior for longer than 6 months, research shows that they're most likely going to stick to it. So if a major psychological model can show that maintenance is a beautiful thing, then why do we hate it so much? Why do we hate it? So I want you to think about it differently. I'm not saying plateaus don't suck at times, because they do. But there are ways to maybe address them a little bit better. Absolutely tweak your program a little bit. I think that's fun. I mean, when I have a client who seems to be a little bit plateaued, maybe in their motivation, I like to change their workout. Not because we're going to get huge physiological changes and adaptations, but because we're going to get huge psychological adaptations in their motivation. And that's a good thing. I want people to be energized to work out, because then they're going to give a much better effort. All right. So think about it that way. And then think about this. Tell yourself this. I want to hit a peak and I want to maintain it. It's not as easy as you think. And, there's another thing you can do once you reach a plateau and a peak, whatever that is. Let's say it's, 50 pounds on the chest press for 12 reps. You can't get past it. So you tell yourself, okay, so every time I do this, I'm going to do it better. Well, Rob, you just said you can't go more. I didn't say more. I said better. I'm going to focus better. I'm going to maybe go a little bit slower. I'm going to think about it more. So I'm going to do this to where if somebody was videoing me, they would say that is the best form I've ever seen for that weight and repetition. So think of it that way, because there are ways through these plateaus. There are ways to maintenance. So instead of dreading them, let's get there. Let's get there first. What are all of our peaks? I bet you, it's not as bad nearly as you think. There is no peak better garage door company in the state of Florida than Daytona Beach's overhead door. Jeff and Zach Hawk are the owners. They are the absolute best. They are simply the best. Give them a shout at overheaddordaytona.com. Until next time, be max fit, be max well. Please share this. Please send it to people. People need to hear the truth. People need to hear the information. And please hit download, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because it simply helps my numbers. All right? I'd appreciate it.